Hello, my name is Mark Taylor, and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hi Ali, thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. I think people know that CPD is really important. I know that a lot of the time people are concerned they don't have enough time to maybe put that into their... And the idea of feedback is something which is incredibly important, as we'll cover towards the end of the podcast in terms of our acronyms. So I think this is going to be fascinating about the way we sort of manage to pull all these things together and how BlueSky is sort of helping people with that. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today, Mark.
So why don't we start specifically BlueSky Education? If people haven't come across it before, sort of give us a sort of a quick summary of exactly what it is that you offer.
Yeah, of course. So BlueSky is an online platform, and it was developed specifically for the education sector by educationalists. It links appraisal, professional development, and quality assurance processes together. We all know, how tough education is, and in terms of workload. Really, the platform aims to make these processes really seamless and reduce the workload associated with them. I think, as in my experience as a teacher, I've seen a number of different processes for appraisal or performance management, whatever schools call that process, and a number of ways that professional development is carried out and linked and in some places tracked. And I think when you then find an online platform that can do that and streamline that process, it's really refreshing. And we work with schools over 40 countries worldwide in a bid to support them in those processes.
And that's really interesting hearing it sort of, let's say, across different countries and obviously different types of schools and that sort of thing, because it's that appraisal and sort of CPD approach which is the important part of it, rather than we're doing a particular part of it, because of course it's the overall analysis that you need, I guess, in terms of being able to put all this information together. But at the same time, I'm also sort of curious about that sort of personal idea of how that works as well. So can you sort of explain a little bit about how the sort of the platform works and how the personal side of it works as well? And I guess like that's sort of how, I guess, the schools sort of understand the platform and how they can keep that sort of personal interaction going, and obviously making everyone is sort of relaxed and it being a positive experience, I guess, is what people are often after.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because if it's a one-size-fits-all system, you're automatically going to turn off some individuals and some schools. And I think the really refreshing thing about BlueSky is it's so customizable, down to the language that's used. I think I just said there, appraisal versus performance management. So that's really customizable in terms of the language and terminology that's used. To the performers that are put in place and the templates, we can use global templates, or schools can upload their own performers that they use, and obviously tweak the language that's used in them. And I think just having that customizable system is a huge advantage. Schools also benefit from having a member of the team who looks after them, helps them through the build and supporting process, and then carries out regular check-ins with the school to see if they need any more support or if they want any changes made. So yeah, in terms of one size fits all, it's definitely not that kind of platform.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, like I said, the regular check-in and that kind of hand-holding sounds wrong, but just that kind of feeling like you're working together, because of course you might be completely set this year, and here we are recording in April, and then you suddenly realize next month or next term suddenly things have changed. Maybe your school's changed slightly, or there's a slightly different approach you've come across that you want to integrate as well. So I guess that ease of integration and that understanding that if you can't do what you need directly yourself, you've got someone there that can help.
Oh, absolutely. And, the platform's been going for 20 years now. And during that time, it's been tweaked and changed. And I think some of the best changes have come from suggestions that our schools have made. They've come to us and said, is it possible to add this in? Am I able to share it with these people as well as the person I'm line managing? And we build those things, we customize it, and we make those things possible. If they're really good suggestions, and we think actually globally that's a really good addition, we can add it as as a universal setting, or we can open it up to schools who want that. Equally, when we're going through the demonstration process with schools, they might say, "Oh, we don't quite like that feature," or "Have you thought about, can we add this in?" And yes, we can.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the demonstration process there. So take us into sort of what people will experience in terms of that they go to the website, they've heard us chatting, and they want to sort of get involved. How does that sort of then work as you get people into that sort of that funnel, as it were, for a better word?
Yeah, so you're right, people go via the website, blueskyeducation.co.uk, and from there you can request a demonstration, and we will then set up a call where we will show the process, how you can customize the different views, because obviously from a Blue Sky's perspective, we've got different layers of access. So there might be an admin view that your school admins would see, and we would take you through what each layer of access would look like down to the individual. And of course, as more and more schools are working within a trust, there also needs to be a trust level as well. So we get to see what each of those layers look like, the ability to customize at each layer and each level, and how each of those settings work.
Yeah, and I guess, like I say, there's a different feeling. Like, say, if you're purely an admin, or if you're a teacher, sort of wanting to see how that development's going, or if you're SLT and you're looking for that kind of where do we want this to be globally, like say, whether it's within the school or within a trust, and whatever that sort of situation is. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this. I know you've got a sort of a long history within education, so how did that journey sort
Yeah.
of come about?
You're right. I taught for 16 years. I'm a secondary school teacher, specialised in PE, and then, through the years, gained more experience. I took on the role of ITT manager within my multi academy trust, and I worked within the Institute of Education in the school. I supported primary, secondary, and special phase trainees, which was really rewarding. Working really closely with universities and training providers, and that really helped me to develop my enthusiasm for CPD, and also develop the skills for delivering effective research-backed CPD as well. So that really, stood me in good position to then take on the role at Blue Sky. So I wasn't actively looking to leave education. I think it's such a rewarding sector to work in. But, COVID came along and we all worked remotely. And I think it kind of opened my eyes to what else was available. But it also coincided with my maternity leave as well. And I was just about to go back to work, actually, and something came up. And I'd worked with Blue Sky when I was ITT manager. They worked with one of the training providers. So I was familiar with the work they did. And I just thought, you're only here once. Let's put a feeler out and see what happens. And yes, here I am,
Yeah.
nearly 2 years later to the day. And it's just been the most fantastic experience. Plus, it enables me to still work within the education sector, work with teachers and schools, which is a really rewarding thing to do.
Yeah, and I think being able to bring that sort of experience into an organisation, which is, it's not one step removed, but it's not in the classroom, as it were, sort of
Yeah.
in the way that people sort of think like that.
Mm.
And I think that's a really important thing. And I think also I love it when I speak to people who've used a product or an organisation before and then wanted to get involved in it as well, because you can't get a better recommendation than that. Than kind of, oh yes, I've had a touch point already. I was really happy with my experience, and
Yeah.
now I can sort of share what I know about that and sort of take that forward and be part of it. So I think that's a really great thing to hear.
Yeah, I think, and we're really fortunate that we've got a number of people in the organisation with that background. But the product itself, the idea came from our CEO Denise Inwood, who herself was a teacher, and obviously seen seen appraisal, performance management, and CPD, and developed the idea. So, as I say, we have been built specifically for the sector by educationalists. So, yeah, having that experience is really valuable.
And I'm curious about CPD generally. As a musician, I sort of have my touch points with schools in terms of what there's an expectation of because the school has to do it. There's also the expectation maybe of what I'd like for my CPD to look
Mm.
like because I want to expand my experience and the things that I can offer as well. So I'm curious in terms of what BlueSky offers, but also in terms of your sort of thoughts on this, in terms of how that works, because as we mentioned earlier, that sort of time poor teachers don't have that
Yeah.
particular thing, and there's also that kind of, well, now you need to do this CPD. Is it on this day? Is it in your own time? And how does it fit in with maybe things which are less structured? So, for example, anyone watching this who's a teacher and involved in education is effectively getting some kind of CPD. They're learning something maybe they didn't know before. And is that sort of part of what you can sort of roll into your sort of progress going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, because CPD and what we perceive as being CPD has evolved so much in the years. I think when I first started teaching, it was very much, well, we're going to go and send you on this course, and it's a conference, and at the end of it, there'll be an evaluation. And it was all very structured and very expensive, to send someone to London for a course for a day. Actually, you could subscribe to an online platform for the same cost. It's crazy. And I think that the budgets have obviously had an impact on the type of CPD, and also workload. So yeah, I think in terms of the CPD that BlueSky offer, our content is video library based, and it actually matches up with the appraisal, or performance management objectives that have been set, and then it will automatically track it. So if, for example, there's a whole school target on oracy, I can then be suggested relevant CPD modules that will help my own practice within that. And once I've undertaken that online CPD module, it will update to inform my line manager. So we've got that kind of paperless workflow there. But in addition, I can then think, well, actually, I know that my colleague incorporates really good oracy opportunities into their lessons. I'm going to go and have a watch, go and see what they're doing in their lessons. I can then add that to my pro forma, and my portfolio, and then I've got an ongoing record of what I'm doing for my own professional growth, but also for the growth of the organisation as well. So yeah, I think in terms of what BlueSky do, trying to make that process as seamless and as paperless,
Mm.
and as easy as possible is really beneficial.
And sort of taking responsibility for, like you said there, I know someone's doing this fantastic work in their class or in their area, I
Mm.
can go and sort of find out about that. That has a very different feel, doesn't it? Like to say, I'm going to a course, so I'm going to have to travel down to London, whatever that is, or it's 4:30, we've had a really long week, it's Friday, and now we're going to sit for an hour and a half while someone just talks to
Mm.
me about something which I think I need to have covered. I've sat through a few of those in time, and I think even just having that different mindset and different feel, what the whole point of it is, just sort of changes the ethos and the experience of the school, sort of say at that very sort of starting point.
Yeah, there are so many different roles within a school, and I think whole school CPD sessions, unless it is something that everyone needs to be involved in, you do look around the room and think, is this a good use of everybody's time? And if the answer is no, then we should be looking at a different system. And I think that effective CPD is personalised. It can be done within people's time limits, and at a point that's suitable for the individual. But yeah, I mean, if we think about the whole staff network within a school, someone on the grounds team is not going to be doing the same CPD as someone who's sitting in the English department. And I think it's really important to have a nod to that and make sure that there is CPD available for everyone. And it's really important that everyone feels that there's CPD available for them, because it is a professional growth opportunity, a career development opportunity. And that lends itself to retention. We're in this huge retention crisis at the moment. And one way that we know, and our schools tell us that they keep hold of their really talented staff, is making sure that there are opportunities for that growth to take place.
Yeah, and that works in two levels, doesn't it? I guess you've got the professional growth in terms of I can see my next job or my where my path might lead, and also in that fact I'm a better teacher today than I was yesterday, and I know that if I stay here for a year or two, I've got these opportunities to take it in my own way, and also I know I'm going to be shown some great things which are going to help me. And I think especially when you're talking about teachers who you want to be in the profession for a long time, it's really important, because we don't want to be the same teachers last year as we were this year, and going forward, because otherwise we sort of get stale. And also we know that the life is moving on as well, so the way that we're interacting in the sorts of conversations we're having in education itself, is changing. So we want to make sure that we're at the forefront of that and feeling like we're improving our skills but also improving ourselves. And I think that relatability then, especially to the children and our peers around, is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we owe it to the young people, don't we? We don't want to be that stale teacher who's rolling in the same lessons day in, day out, and doing the same things 10 years later down the line. We owe it to them. We owe it to ourselves, because that leads us to job satisfaction. And there's some great research that says that the higher job satisfaction actually leads to a healthier life. So actually, if we're taking care of that and we're having our own professional growth, actually, in ourselves, we're going to be a healthier person. But I think also for the sector, organisations, people are your most important tool, asset. And if we're looking after them by providing opportunities for professional growth, we're going to keep hold of our really talented people. And I know it's definitely within its infancy in the education sector, but having a people strategy that looks after staff at every stage of the staff life cycle is really important for this. So thinking about advertising what CPD is available, what your approach is at the attraction phase and the recruitment phase, and then making sure that that's carried out within the retention phase, and even at the saying goodbye phase when you're actually losing people. Because even if you've got the best culture in the world, schools will still lose members of staff for various reasons. And therefore, preparing people for their next steps is equally a really good thing to do, because actually it serves as a great advertisement for your setting too, that you're setting people up for their next steps and their next career goals. So yeah, I think having that kind of underlying culture through your people strategy, where CPD really is at the heart of that, is a really effective method of doing that.
And I think this is where I think what I was sort of getting at the beginning, that sense of, we're not a website and a platform. We're a people organization that's helping you as a people organization sort of come together. And I love that idea. Like, say, even people who are maybe moving on to a different school or a different job, that we're all kind of colleagues fleetingly. And it might be 20 years, but it might be 5 years, it might be a couple of years, but we're doing the best we can for everyone at this particular moment. And whatever their path is beyond that, you sort of, I guess, like children in some ways, you let them go and they then sort of bloom into whatever their next thing is. But I think, like you say, again, if it comes back to that ethos and that sense of environment, then it can only ever be positive. And that's a difficult thing to get across, but I think that's where the human connections and these conversations come through.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. I think having people move on to different organisations, we are still joined, particularly with social media as it is now. We see colleagues saying, oh, I'm going to come back and visit this school because I know they do X, Y, and Z really well. And I'm going to go and take it back to my own organisation, and it's going to have a really positive impact on what we do here. And I think particularly with the introduction of MATs, we're seeing that approach more and more. We're seeing CPD that's MAT wide, that actually another organisation can then join in, a much more collaborative approach to what we do within education.
Yeah, and I'm also curious in terms of the sort of the age of people taking these things. So I know early career teachers are something which is important to you as well.
Mhm.
Sort of how the idea of CPD and evaluation and all of that changes maybe across people who've been in the profession for a long time as opposed to the people just sort of starting out.
So I think our younger teachers, those that have just come through the system, are much more used to kind of having this instant approach to CPD. So if they want a quick guide on how to teach a particular topic or refresher on subject knowledge, because perhaps they're not a subject specialist, which we're obviously seeing a lot more in the current climate. I think having access to almost instant CPD modules that will help them give a very quick guide to how to teach X, Y, and Z, or what misconceptions can come up when you're teaching a particular topic. I think we're seeing a much more kind of instant approach from our ECTs. Partly, I think that may have stemmed from the early career framework, which really does think about kind of these incremental shifts in practice. As opposed to a teacher who perhaps has been in the classroom a bit longer and has been maybe used to more traditional methods of CPD courses, for example, or reading blogs. But I think, yeah, younger teachers definitely seem to be embracing a much more technology focused approach. But I think from our schools, the feedback that we get is that online material is available and accessible for everyone. And I think it was the TES workload report that came out very recently actually said that 57% of schools have now put in place online CPD. So although younger teachers, of course, are naturally driven to this online method, actually it shows that schools are embracing that change as well, and more are turning towards this online approach.
And to be honest, that figure's probably lower than I'd expect it to be, but that's probably maybe just in my experience and in the schools that I'm working at. But yeah, just that kind of you do see that across the board, and it's fascinating how it sort of develops in different areas and different situations. And like I say, you're sort of in the perfect position to sort of have that sort of global idea of how it works in, like I say, different schools or different places. And I'm always fascinated, people that are involved in education, in whichever side. Is there an education experience or a teacher that you remember, and did that sort of feed into when you were then a teacher, or maybe even in your sort of role now?
Yeah, I look back and I think I've had some wonderful teachers. Obviously, within PE, I was really inspired by my A level teachers. I think it was Kerry Jewis, Hannah Gaskell, and Anne Stewart, and they just made lessons so much fun. And whilst I'm talking about making lessons practical, and you think, well, PE, of course, it's practical. Um, A level PE actually isn't practical. The vast majority of it is theory based, and they just had a way of making those lessons really engaging. And they really did spur my love for anatomy and physiology. And that is you know, the area that I just loved to teach. Loved all elements of PE, but anatomy and physiology really was, and still is, an area of interest. But I think, we talk about teachers. Teachers are everywhere. I could talk about, I used to volunteer within a cell training charity. And when I think about some of the teachers I had in that capacity who could take children who'd never been on the water before and they could make them feel comfortable in that environment and teach them how to sail a 60-foot yacht in a weekend, you kind of think, well, that's amazing. How do they do that? How do they make these people feel comfortable and confident? And you look at those experiences, and those approaches of getting to know the individual and building a rapport with the individual to help them feel comfortable. And that definitely translates to the classroom. I think even if you walk into a classroom with a class full of students you've never met before, having that rapport and trying to build that relationship is really at the forefront of what teachers do. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been really lucky to have those experiences.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it fits in really nicely with what you said before about sort of taking control of your own CPD in terms of, you know, it's very easy to think, well, online platform, I'm going to sit on my own and just cover this course. Whereas when he was sort of saying that I know this teacher does this thing in one particular area, whatever that happens to be, I'm going to spend some time with them. I'm going to sort of analyze what they do, have conversations, and then you can see how that fits into what you just described, because you're learning in all different aspects. And while there might be a formality of it in terms of, yes, I can tell you what I've learned and how I've gone about it, that human element again is that key thing, isn't it? And you pick up so much by just being around people who are very good at what they do, and then it becomes very exciting because, like I say, you put your spin on it because you're your own personality, and you can only be the best person of yourself, but you sort of get lots of different elements from lots of different experiences, and that can only be of benefit.
Absolutely. I think just having those individual experiences, everything builds up, doesn't it? And it's a cumulative experience. So yeah, I try and take everything, all my experiences, I try and roll up and use in all areas of life. Yeah.
What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or indeed is there a piece of advice you might give your younger self now, sort of looking back as a slightly older Ali, shall we say?
Yeah, well, I think for this piece of advice, I'm a much older Ali, because it was from my nan when I was very young. I know you're a musician yourself. I also played the violin when I was much younger, and my nan was a fantastic cellist, and she always used to help me when I was getting ready for those exams, and being the young person I was, I'd never prepared for those exams in time, and I was always kind of rushing to get ready for them. And I remember her saying to me, stop, no half-hearted practice. And it was, I used to just pick up my violin and rush through these pieces in a bid to try and get that last minute practice done. And I think that piece of advice has stuck with me. And every time I'm doing something, mundane or work related, I always think, no, don't, if you're going to do it properly. And it's really kind of helped me to set the bar high for myself, I think. So yeah, that's the advice I'd give a younger self, or anyone else, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And like I say, as a musician, I've done the 10,000 hour rule, and it's very easy to kind of just feel like you're being really productive doing the things that you do know, rather than the few bars or the little quarter of transition that you haven't done. And I think it's great advice for anyone learning anything, because it really just, it's those skills you need. It's those 5 minutes of really focused learning, which is so much better than an hour of just going over something you know already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same can be said, for exercise or for sport in general as well. When you think about training, lots of people are kind of slogging away and doing long workouts and get demotivated by doing that. And you think, actually, yeah, short, sharp, and to a point, and being consistent is much more important than long, eked out practice sessions. Yeah.
Definitely is. Sport and music would be at the heart of everything related to education, if we could if we could make that the case. So anyone listening who has that control, then let's find that silver bullet from somewhere. Is there a resource you'd like to share? And this can be personal, professional, and anything from a video, song, book, podcast, film, anything that's just sort of something you've liked, or something that's had an impact in some way.
So I've got a very young daughter. She's just about to turn 3, and I think the Parenting Hell podcast has kept me going during that time.
I know it well.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it just really refreshing. And I think when you think, oh, blimey, is this right? Am I doing the right thing? Or yeah, I think it's a funny way to kind of keep your sense of humour and see what's actual reality for parenting. In terms of music, Wheels on the Bus seems to be on repeat on my playlist at the moment. Nothing more exciting than that. But I think in terms of having an impact on my life, my Spotify playlist is pretty eclectic, from the Beatles up to System of a Down. It's very wide ranging. But I think probably one of the most inspirational pieces and pieces of music to me is probably from Schubert, and it's Symphony 4, and I think it stems back to my orchestra days, and just it's the memories around that, playing with really fantastic people, but equally, I used to go on courses that were a week long, and we used to sit down together on the first day and try this piece, and it sounded absolutely appalling. But by the end of the week, you had probably 100 young people from all over the country contributing to these pieces that sounded fantastic, and that's the one that really sticks in my mind. So yeah, music is important, and very wide ranging in our household at the moment.
I can, yes, exactly. Wheels on the bus all the way through to Schubert is one of those things.
Yeah.
and I can really relate to the music course thing. I mean, Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony was the one. It was the first one that I did like that. Like, say you start and everyone's going, "There's no way we're getting through this," to actually then being able to perform it, like say a few days later. And I think the thing that I like about it the most is that it's that shared experience, like you said, in terms of everyone learning, everyone wanting to do the best for themselves and for everyone else. And I sort of like that kind of sort of mirroring of what we're talking about today. If you have a school in a situation where the ethos is such that we're trying to do this because we're trying to improve, we want to set the environment that we want, we can help you do that. It might take a bit longer, it might be something that happens over a number of months or a number of years, but it kind of feeds into an atmosphere which we want to be involved in. And I think anything that you can relate to like that, and you can, like say, you can take it back to experiences you've had before, is a really positive one. And I think it's key to, like say, retention, to people's well-being, and their progression as well. And so I think understanding different areas of your life and how you can sort of make those correlations, I think, can be really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, obviously, the acronym of Education on Fire is really important for us here, and by that we mean feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. What is it that sort of comes across your mind when you hear those words?
I think they encapsulate education themselves, don't they? I mean, when we think about feedback, teachers are giving that every second of every day, whether it's a fleeting comment, it could even be a look if we think about behaviour, right up to, really formal assessment and the feedback that you gain from that. I think students gain inspiration from teachers day in, day out as well. And I think teachers hold that position of responsibility, and we have to be really careful with that, because we can inspire the right behaviours and the right thoughts. But we have to be careful what we do with that. It's an important position. And I think in terms of resilience, the most effective learners are the most resilient learners. And teachers in classrooms have got to make sure that we are encouraging this resilience. And when we give feedback, that we're not giving it in a way that's hampering that resilience and making people give up and think, well, this is obviously a weakness of mine, and kind of thinking about that growth mindset of I can't do it to I can't do it yet, and making sure that we're building on that mindset. And I think that that's true to be said of teachers as well when we're thinking about CPD. Well, actually, this is a weakness in my classroom at the moment. I know many teachers are struggling with behaviour management at the moment. That seems to be a really tricky area. And thinking about what we can do, what tweaks we can make, those incremental shifts in practice. How can we become more resilient to improve those skills ourselves, and then have the knock-on effect in our classrooms. And in terms of empowerment, well, teachers empower students every day, giving them responsibility, empowering them with the skills and the knowledge that they need to take those next steps. But I think schools and the culture within schools need to be empowering, in order to retain staff. And I think that definitely doubles back to CPD as well. I think if we're giving people opportunities for professional growth and we're helping them with career development, we're empowering them to continue their careers, to take those promotions when they arise, and empowering them to be the best staff and colleagues that they can be.
Yeah, and I love the way that everything is intertwined, isn't it? Like
Oh,
we've been talking about CPD today. We're talking about, accountability, about learning self-accountability, as well as, maybe having to do courses which someone is telling you that you have to do. But it's a combination of all those things. They all work together. And I think they all sort of come back into this sort of human element, which of course is the essence of what we're all doing here. And I think understanding how everything fits together, how it fits together for you, and you being proactive in how you want that to look, which is going to affect all of those things going forward, is a really important thing. So Adi, thank you so much for chatting today. I really, really appreciate it. I know you mentioned the website before, but just tell us again the best place people can go and find out more information.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me today, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you. So you can find us at blueskyeducation.co.uk, and obviously on social channels as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and thank you so much for being part of the Education on Fire community. Links and details of today's podcast are in the description, and if you would like to support the show with a small donation, that's a wonderful way to help me bring you more creative and inspiring learning. Please visit educationonfire.com/support, and remember, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.